Yes, I'm the annoying one that's like, guys, we gotta like, that's my role in every scenario. Like,
Kayla came up, well, I'll tell you.
No.
Yeah. All right.
You got your clicker?
Yeah.
I'm gonna give them a 5-minute.
It's all over but the crying now. Of laughter. It could be a real snooze fest. We don't know.
Start in about 5 minutes. If you'd like to grab some refreshments, something to drink, restrooms are right outside the doors. We started right at 4:20.
The president's staying.
Hmm?
The president is staying.
He won't.
He knows you, right?
Yeah, he knows me.
I mean, because you keep coming here, right?
Right. I won't quit them.
I did check the sign in,
Yeah?
and Marlene is not signed in.
Well, of course he's not.
Well,
Of course he's not. He'll never come to any. It's like he hates me.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. But what are you going to ask?
yeah,
What role did Veneta, Oklahoma play?
Hey, do you have a question you want me to plant?
No, I
Because
just.
my team is here and they're not working. I can give them a question.
No.
I would ask if women over 65 interpret this differently from women
Oh
under
yeah.
65.
So that's
I
the question
was.
I've had. Like,
Yeah.
what
Yes.
has been the reaction
Yes.
of this?
Were you here when I was who was I telling? Oh, I was telling the book people that my mother, as well as all of her friends in the boomer generation, are having a very different reaction to Gemma. Many of them tell me Gemma needs to buck up and get over it. Many of them get frustrated, Gemma. One woman told me, you know what, she had a good enough husband. She needed to just get over it. And I was like, aw. And the millennials are like, oh man, they felt seen. And it's like, okay, there you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
literally. That's what I said.
So yes, there's that. There is that. Mom did not like that, but that is the truth.
And also their aspect.
Yes.
Of like the willing.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us for Drury Dialogues, an evening with Dr. Meg Myers Morgan. My name is Carrie Richardson, and I'm the Executive Director of the local nonprofit Leadership Springfield, which oversees Rosie, a free women's network. As a twice Drury graduate, I'm really grateful for the opportunity that Drury continues to offer, gathering bright minds together in spaces like this to explore topics and engage with curiosity. But before we kick things off, I want to thank the Drury team. Will you please join me in thanking Kayla and the Drury team for putting this together? So, more than 2 decades ago, I met Meg in a random class at Drury while we were completing our undergrad. And like most early 2000 college graduates, we've connected mostly through social media on our personal and professional journeys. But through it all, I have followed Meg's extraordinary writing. Her books have reached readers around the world, including the award-winning essay collection Harebrained, the one that made me laugh to the point of tears numerous times. Also, her internationally translated bestseller, Everything Is Negotiable. Some of you in the room attended the local AWC event a few years ago featuring this book and Meg as the keynote. And most recently, her #1 best-selling novel, The Inconvenient Unraveling of Gemma Sinclair, truly a 5-star read. So in her work, Dr. Meg Myers Morgan explores one central truth, that knowing your worth influences who you become, what you ask for, and what you're willing to accept. She's a college professor at the University of Oklahoma, a mom, a wife, a friend, a daughter to her proud parents who are here with us today, and an incredible author. She's also an influencer who makes you laugh and think in equal measure. Here to share more about her newest book release and all the ways we unravel and stitch ourselves back together again in this wild ride of life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Meg Myers Morgan.
So my freshman year here, I took a media writing class with a woman named Pat O'Brien, and she smoked a lot. And you had to walk through her cigarette smoke to get to class. And the way that class worked is every time you'd come in, there'd be a prompt on the desk, 2 or 3 sentences about a real world experience that was happening, and you had to turn that prompt into a full news story. And I walked in one day, and on the prompt, it read that there was an unprecedented number of Portuguese men of war on the Florida shoreline. And I thought, wow, I had no idea Portugal had invested this much in armed forces, but of course we have to write about this. They're innocent beachgoers being attacked by international military men. I read on with the prompt, and it said it's really hard to spot these guys because their camouflage is great, and I thought that tracks. But it said you'll be able to notice them as they shimmy out of the water, and I thought, wow, what an interesting battle tactic for these international military men. The prompt also said that if you run across a dead one on the beach, don't touch it and run and tell the authorities, and I thought that is good advice for any dead body you might come across, but particularly the corpses of our enemies. And the classmate next to me leaned over and she said, you know, my dad was bitten by one of these last summer. And I said, they bite? I was envisioning spears, but I don't know what Portugal budgets for defense spending. So my freshman year here, 25 years ago, I learned a very, very, very valuable lesson when I got my grade back, which is you must be cautious of your own certainty. My senior year of college, I graduated with 3 majors: English, creative writing, and communications. And no one knew I was doing that. I didn't know you were supposed to tell someone. When I went to go graduate and do my audit, I said I had 3 majors. They said, you can't do that. And I said, but I did. And they said, you can't do that. And then they looked at the paperwork and they said, okay, fine, you can do that. So never trust what people say you can't do. So that senior year in my English and writing capstone, I had to write a senior capstone project. And Professor Meilinger at the time said what we'd prefer students do, and what everybody does, is pick an author and do a really deep dive and give us 100 pages on that. I thought, okay, I think I'll write about Virginia Woolf. I had not read anything by Virginia Woolf. I still have not read anything by her. I couldn't tell you one thing Virginia Woolf has written. But that didn't really feel very true to myself. What I really wanted to do when I graduated was write, and I wanted to write nonfiction, and I wanted to write funny things, and I wanted to be David Sedaris, and so I went to Professor Meilinger, and I said I'd really rather write a collection of humorous essays through a 19, 21-year-old feminist. And he said, okay, we'll support that. And I said, okay, but here's the thing. I want the project to be titled after the main essay, which is about my experience with my first pap smear. So my college capstone was called Pap Smear and Other Essays, and the committee was comprised of 6 men who I had to explain what a speculum was. But wow, did it send me out on a great journey. And since then, since graduating in 2005, I have gotten married. I've been married for 17 years. I've had 2 daughters. I got a master's degree and a PhD at the University of Oklahoma. I am now a professor there. I'm an associate professor, and I run a graduate program, so I teach people to be leaders in nonprofit and public service. I wrote Harebrained. I had one person in the audience was carrying around a copy, and that makes me really happy. But my husband and I actually self-published that. It was another collection of essays that came out of Pap Smear. And it did really well in sales and won the gold medal for humor from the Independent Publishers Book Award, so I was very excited about that. And so because of that, I was asked to give a TED Talk. And I gave a TED Talk about mentoring women graduate students, because that was my job at the time, and I was comparing it to what it was like to raise my 2 young daughters, and how these 2 young daughters were just really, really, really good negotiators. And so because of that TED Talk, an agent reached out and says, you have to publish this as a book. And so I inadvertently, and I can't stress this enough, became an expert in negotiation with no intent whatsoever to do that. And so for the past 10 years, have been a keynote speaker on the topic of negotiation and self-worth, and have worked with a lot of women on that specifically. And then that leads us into why we're here today, my debut novel, The Inconvenient Unraveling of Gemma Sinclair. This book, when I was in undergrad here, if you were an English major, you wanted to write a novel. Everybody there wanted to write the great American novel, except for me. I wanted to write funny essays, but everybody else was very serious, and they really wanted to write a novel, and I said, I will never, ever want to write a novel. So anyway, this came out in 2015. I did decide to write a novel, and part of why I decided to write a novel is because I had reached the end of wanting to talk about my children. When they were old enough now, they were their stories, and it felt really weird to maybe tell their stories in a way that I could when they were babies and they had no sense of agency, and I just felt uncomfortable about that, but I still had more to say. So this book is about Gemma. She's a therapist, and she's just given birth to her 2nd child, and her estranged brother is coming to visit. And while he's there, the baby at 4 days old gets injured, and this unravels Gemma, who starts to spiral because she is unaware that she has postpartum depression. And because this happens to her child, it brings up memories of an incident that happened to her when she was a child, and so now Gemma is tasked with unraveling her family dynamics, her family secrets, the way she's raising her own kids, and everything around her is unraveling. Her marriage, her work, everything is at threat, and Gemma has to carefully unravel her life and reweave it back together. And so what happened when this book came to be is I put together a book launch team made up of 80 people who helped me kind of spread the word about it. Several of them are here. Carrie is one of them. But what came from that is a lot of people saying, you know, when I read this book about this woman who unintentionally unraveled, right? This inciting incident happened that made her fall apart. I kind of found myself being able to carefully unravel. And so that turned into The Unravelers, a platform that I now run in which every month I write about a topic, whether it's people-pleasing or self-worth or energy or time blocking or all of those things. And I teach a class on it, and we are purposely trying to unravel, so we don't have an unraveling like Gemma Sinclair. So with that, I want to talk to you today about what that unraveling is, what it means to untangle from what isn't serving you. And so you can use Gemma Sinclair as a horrible warning or a beautiful example of the ways in which the feelings we have as women are important and meaningful, and all of our knots matter. So when it comes to the 5 parts of unraveling, 5 things happen. The first is the tug, that feeling that you are uncomfortable either in this situation or in this period of your life. There is a tug. Then there's a tangle. That's that thing that's knotted, and you notice it, and you tease it out, and then you're left with the tatters, and then you get to thread it all back together. And you watch as Gemma Sinclair goes through this, but I want to talk about what might happen when you go through this. So the first is that tug, and the tug is really that discomfort. That part where you go, something doesn't feel right. It's when you notice you are out of alignment with yourself. Whether it's in the way that one person is talking to you, or it's your whole job, or it's your marriage, whatever it is, you just notice. And the way that we notice these things is through our feelings, through our reactions, and in the aftermath. Now, when we talk about feelings, this is an interesting thing because obviously as women, we're told we're more emotional, we're the more emotional gender, but we're never really taught how to feel our feelings. We're very much taught how to think them. I'm upset and it must be because of this, and I start crafting a story. We're not very good at feeling our feelings, and I'll point you to this quote that I think about all the time because it gets used all the time, and it's from Henry David Thoreau, and he says, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Most men, he didn't say people, he said men. And we know men is neutral, right, okay? But let's break this down. So most men lead lives of quiet desperation. We just love Henry David Thoreau for all that he did for philosophy and thinking about nature. But what we don't really talk about is in all of this solitude and all of this growth, this man's mother was coming to Walden Pond and doing his laundry. A woman was helping this man lead his life of quiet desperation. So I think going forward, we could change the quote, and I'd love you to quote me from here on out instead of this quote, most women lead lives of unconscious anger. Meg Myers Morgan, 2026. And I mean this because anger is one of those emotions that people, particularly women, are not aware they have. But I think all of us, the women in the room, are sitting on a pile of seething anger. But the problem is we don't know how to recognize it, right? They've actually done studies on anger suppression, and it's actually why women have more incidences of autoimmune disorder and heart disease, because we don't even know we're angry and we're suppressing it. Now, I don't know about you. You're on your own journey to figure out what anger is to you, but I'll show you how it shows up for me, and I've been working on it. The first is self-criticism. I am the first, if something goes wrong, to make it my fault. I did something wrong. I must have done something wrong. And about 10 years into my career at OU, I finally had someone call me out on it and say, you know, every time I come to you with something that's going on at the university, you somehow make it your fault. The entire University of OU has problems because of me. I'm really good at it. And so I realized that anger is an outward emotion. It has to go somewhere. And if we don't let it out, we let it in. So when I start to feel a little bit self-critical, I will go, oh, are you angry? And I'm always angry. And it's so much easier to go, oh my God, I'm angry, and to feel that for a little bit. And then the second way, and I think a lot of you all will relate to this, is helpfulness. One of the most beautiful masks that women wear with their anger is being very helpful. And I'll give you an example. When your child has not cleaned their room for the 5th day in a row, and then you go into the room and you are just cleaning that is anger. That is being super helpful in your anger. And so for me, that's what anger looks like. You need to figure out for you what anger looks like. But also there's these reactions, right? What we do when we're in that discomfort, when we're feeling that tug, we might shrink, we might get quiet, we might not talk as much, we might overfunction. We might start to perform as though we need to act like we're a certain type of person. But freedom is that space between stimulus and response. And so what I noticed about myself in the tug is that it was so uncomfortable for me not to respond to people. If you sent me an email, I needed to respond to that day. And all of that immediacy meant that I was saying yes every time. Oh my God, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll come speak at that. Yes, I will grade your paper quicker. Yes, you can have an extension. Yes, I will make macaroni for dinner. Whatever it was, just stop asking me questions. The answer is yes. But when I would sit with that discomfort of saying I am not going to respond immediately, I'm going to give it 24 to 48 hours before I respond. It was a lot more no's. I was in more alignment with myself. Now I wait maybe a week. It's so many more no's, right? But we have to be willing to sit with that discomfort. And then of course there's that aftermath, that piece where we're laying down in our bed at night. And that tug is still there, and we're going over that situation. We're going over that lunch that didn't go well, or that presentation that didn't go well, or whatever it is. And we have to ask ourselves, what is familiar here? Is this situation something I've been in before? Do I always seem to be friends with the same type of person, and here I am yet again feeling unvalued? What is the sensation in my body, right? For me, it's this very specific lump in my throat that I get, and I know it very well. And finally, what was my automation, right? What did I immediately do because I felt this thing? I felt that lump in my throat, so I started people pleasing, or I felt that lump in my throat and I started cleaning my kid's room. It's being fully aware of I've been here before, and to slow down and recognize how I can maybe not be there again. Patterns repeat when we keep reaching for the same thread. So if we cannot slow down and identify those patterns, we'll just keep knotting up in the same way. So when it comes to the tug, it's that discomfort that you're noticing. I need you to know, what is your tell and what is it telling you? Then we move to the tangle, right? We have noticed something is wrong. Now we need to figure out and acknowledge what's happening. And that acknowledgement is when you finally identify every string that feeds that knot. When you finally say, okay, I'm going to give this attention and figure out what's going on. Something that is the whole purpose of this book is Gemma has no idea why she's so upset. She has no idea why she's making what many reviewers have called terrible decisions for a mother. We don't know, right? Because she hasn't quite acknowledged. In order to acknowledge and identify, you have to know your narratives, the expectations, and the context. So something that we do all the time, whether we know it or not, is we create narratives in our head, right? We have stories about ourselves, we have stories about our spouse and our friends and oh my God, we have stories about our bosses, right? So what story do you always tell? And if you were to tell me, oh, I don't tell a story, I'm magical and wonderful, I'd say, okay, then answer the following, right? I can't do that because that's your story. I can't do that because I don't have the degree, or I don't feel pretty enough, or I'm not ready to put myself, I can't do that because of the kids. Or I would, but, right? I would do that, but my boss just wouldn't go for it. It's just not the time in our organization. Or I will once I have. I will be happy once I have this promotion. I will be you don't know how. I have worked with over 500 women negotiating their salaries, and every time they get more money, that is a mild high for a little bit, right? Because sometimes it hasn't really addressed that knot. But I'd also say something that happens with our stories, and I had a former student named Katie. And she came to me and she was contemplating changing jobs. She said, I'm just in agony because every other good decision I've made, every other opportunity that's come to me has just fallen in my lap. And I said, hey, can you rephrase that and give yourself more credit? Because you're acting like you're some sort of passive bystander and people are just coming and throwing jobs at you. You know how people throw jobs at you? She said, I don't actually know how to rephrase it. And I said, well, I would rephrase it by saying, you seem like a person who is so patient and have such discernment, you know the right thing when it's there, right? So you have some qualities about yourself that you are totally blowing past by saying things just fall in my lap. And so the fact that you haven't moved on this decision tells me you got to be more patient, or this isn't in alignment with what you want, because in the past you've been patient and you've been discerning. Next, we have to understand our expectations, and we don't do this, right? In order to have unmet expectations are what leads to dissatisfaction. So in order to have a satisfactory life, you would have to understand your expectations. You could walk into a restaurant and know it's a terrible restaurant and have a terrible meal, and you go, that's about what I thought, right? Nothing's worse than watching an Oscar-nominated film and not liking it, right? Because it didn't meet your expectations. So expectations are incredibly powerful. That's how we know how job satisfaction is. Most people are dissatisfied in their jobs because this wasn't what I expected. This wasn't what they told me it was going to be. This isn't anything like the job description. So if we know logistically that expectations are very important, then why are we not spending a lot of time making sure we understand our own? Before you go into any situation, and I literally mean before you go into a lunch with your friend who's been weird lately, I need you to sit in the car and set your expectations. What is my vision for this lunch? Do I really want to sit there and try to work out our issues, or do I just want to enjoy my friend today? What do I want to get out of this? What is my goal? And when I'm in that room, what is my impression? What's happening with my body? Am I feeling tense around her? Am I feeling relaxed? And then what's the evidence? Because because I've been mad at her, I interpret everything she says as snarky, but maybe that's just what I heard and not what she said. And finally, what is my takeaway, right? What is the wisdom here? Is this the friend I need to have for now? Or is this not what I want? Setting your expectations for everything is crucial to living a satisfying life. It's crucial to having a satisfying lunch. It's crucial to a satisfying marriage. If we aren't very clear, this is what I expected, we have no shot at hitting those expectations. Finally, you also have to understand the context that you're in, and then it's really hard for people to kind of separate themselves and their worth from the environment that they're in. So if you get tangled in a knot, you might not understand the context is at play. It's not you, right? So when we think of context, what is the setting that we're in? Who are the people that are around us? What are the stakes of this decision? What are the decisions happening and what's being unspoken here? A really great example of this, and this is really kind of crude and black and white, but if I had gone to medical school and trained to be a neurosurgeon, and I was a top neurosurgeon, I now have a very contextual life around that. I make a certain amount of money, I see a certain type of people every day, and people respond to me a certain way when I say I'm a doctor. But after 10 years, I get really overwhelmed and burned out, and I just want to go be a school teacher. So I go across the street to the elementary school, and I said I'd like to be an elementary school teacher. Now my context has changed. My salary is different, the people I see every day are different, and people respond differently when I say I'm a teacher rather than a doctor. I'm not different. My worth is not different. Who I am, my values, my heart, my soul, all of that stuff, my worth is the same, my context has changed. Right, so don't let the context you're in determine your worth. You need to know your worth and find the right context. Then when we think about that tangle, when we think about addressing and actually acknowledging that, understand what are the strings and who is pulling them tight. The middle part is the hard part. The middle part is the tease. The middle part is the work. And thank you, Gemma, for doing that work, right? Thank you to all the millennial moms who are doing that work, right? Who are addressing those knots. Because the tease is really the confrontation. And the confrontation happens when you actually engage with the knot. And there's a few ways to engage with the knot, and it's messy and hard, but you engage with unconscious work, you engage with an attitude change, and you engage with difficult conversations. So starting with unconscious work, what I'm really just saying is you've got to bring what's unconscious to the surface. And you can do that in a few ways. The most beautiful way to do that is talk therapy. I can't stress it enough. As somebody who works in higher ed, what people don't know about higher ed is that you are 6 times more likely as a graduate student to suffer from mental health issues. And so as a teacher, only in a graduate program, I see it every single day. And I cannot recommend enough talk therapy, but there's also meditation and journaling. Essentially, we're just trying to stir up the issues. When I had our firstborn 14 years ago, I had a lot of postpartum depression, I had a lot of postpartum anxiety, and then I just had the regular run-of-the-mill anxiety. So I had it all. And I realized that was coming out in really unfortunate ways with my kid. I would snap at her when she was just being a child. I would get really flustered. I just wasn't regulated. And I knew that if I was going to be the parent that I wanted to be, I was going to have to do this unconscious work. I was going to have to untangle those knots so I could show up for her how I want to. Now, she is currently a huge source of my anxiety, but it's a different kind of anxiety. What Dr. Fox says, my favorite character in this book, is what she says to Gemma is what you don't handle will handle you. And so if you aren't kind of keeping track of that, it's going to blow up in unfortunate ways as it does for our Gemma Sinclair. The second thing you have to do is have attitude change. Now, my 14-year-old that I talked about is many things. She's bold and smart and kind, but she's also a little bit of a malcontent. And she had to sign up for a foreign language class, and she chose German. And I think she chose German because it fit in the schedule, but whatever. So when she first started German, she came home and told the same story. We had a narrative already forming. I hate my German class, I hate my German teacher, and my German teacher hates me. And we heard those 3 things over and over and over. And remember, I'm a millennial mom who's done unconscious work, so I'm very regulated, and I put up with this for about 8 weeks, which I think is pretty heroic. At the 8-week mark, I said, babe, I think, hear me out because I want to give space. Hear me out. I think you need to have an attitude change. And I want you to try one thing, and if it doesn't work, then we'll go back to complaining because I'm having fun and you're having fun, and we'll just go back to that. But what I want you to do is I want you to go to school tomorrow, and I want you to say to yourself, I love this German class, I love this German teacher, and I am his favorite student. She's like, okay, but I can go back to complaining the next. I say, yeah, you can go back to complaining the next day. So I wake her up that morning, and she says, okay, I'm so excited for German. I love my German teacher. I love that German class, and I'm his favorite student. So she gets home that afternoon, and she was mad, but it was a new kind of mad, you know? I said, come on. She goes, yeah, it worked. It worked. So that's what happens, because what you say is what you see. And I don't mean that fixed all her problems. She still has problems time to time with German. I can't understand the conjugation any better than she can, but she's trying. But just by saying that, just by saying, you know what, let me dust this off and look at it a different way, helped her. And so something that I do in this same sense, especially when it comes to people, is see everything and everyone for what they are, not what they aren't. And that is a real game changer. Oh, I've got a friend who's always late, right? And if I saw that every time in that friend, she always does that. But you know what else she does? She always sends me cards on my birthday, and she drops by with flowers, and she's always texting me nice things. There's a lot of things I love about her. And the more that I focus on who she is, not who she isn't, which I recommend that for your children as well, is truly a game changer, and I also recommend it for how you look at yourself. The final thing you have to do when you're engaging in this work is have difficult conversations. And these are, in fact, very difficult. The most difficult conversation I had was 14 years ago. We had had our first child, and I was in the middle of a PhD, and we were very broke, so we couldn't afford childcare. And so my mother-in-law would come to the house and watch our kid while I went to class. Then I would come back, and I would do homework and research while taking care of her, and then my husband would come home, I'd cook us dinner, and then I'd drive about an hour and a half to a different university to get teaching experience, and then get home about 11 o'clock at night. And I did that over and over for about 6 months until I lost my ever-living mind. And I thought about, how am I going to get my husband, whose life, by the way, had not changed at all, to now change his life? Because mine had changed dramatically. My life was very different, and his was not. And so I sat there with a yellow legal pad and wrote out all the things that were bothering me, and what I could imagine him agreeing to do these things, but what I couldn't imagine is what would be the benefit for him to do that, right? We had had this really happy, good marriage for 2 or 3 years before the baby came, and I was really struggling. But I just really couldn't figure out, okay, we're 6 months in. At this point, what would be the benefit for him to change? So he comes home one night, and I handed the baby very gently to him, and I said, I am really struggling. And what I'm struggling with is everything about our relationship has to change tonight, really. And I'm just worried that I don't think that you'll find benefit in that. And he looked at me and he said, oh my God, Meg, you at your best is the benefit. You getting to be the best spouse and friend and PhD partner. That's it, that's all you gotta do. And let me tell you, one, we're still married, but it was a game changer in our marriage. Because for the next 14 years, I've not done a single load of laundry. He overshot it a little, but I was like, me at my best is sitting on the couch. So that's worked out well marriage-wise. But I think there's also just, when you think about that, everyone in your life is in cahoots with you for your success. That's what that taught me. Of course my husband would want the best for me. Why would I think otherwise? Of course he's in cahoots for my success. And then I thought, oh my God, are my professors in cahoots for are my students on my side? And I would say even strangers, especially strangers, are in cahoots with you, because when I have to call up the gynecologist and tell the lady at the front desk I need to change the appointment, I am very afraid she is going to yell at me. But when I think, no, Linda's on my side, she wants to help me change this date, it makes me go into that conversation in a much different way. It makes me approach everything in a much different way, where strangers and everyone in my life wants the best for me. Now, how can I bring you in and have partnership in that? It might take a difficult conversation. When it comes to that tease, that really hard work, unraveling will take work. But people, those knots will take your life. So you've got to really be willing to tease those out. Then we move to the tatter. And the tatter is the least fun part because that's what's left over when you've untangled it all and now everything's on the floor. The tatter is really the fallout. And the fallout is when you accept that things will and must be different. And that's really hard. Nobody likes change. We as a species move at a very efficient pace. We only want to have things and make decisions that are fastest and quickest, not because we're stupid, because we're smart. We want to be really efficient. And so to have a brand new experience or a brand new life or a brand new friendship or a brand new marriage, that takes a lot of work. It takes something that none of us are good at, which is accepting, and we have to accept the trade-offs, the perception, and the responsibility. When it comes to the trade-offs, essentially the cost of your new reality will be your old one. And as a junior here, I went and studied abroad in London. And I had a roommate with me who was really adventurous and really happy about this, but I wanted to go, but I'm a homebody. And I'm an anxious person, and I'm not a great traveler, and I have GI issues. It's a whole thing. Like, I was stressed about traveling. And I remember a couple nights before we left, I said, how do we get our textbooks over there? And she's like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out? Like, are you crazy? Like, we're just gonna go to London and figure it out? So for those first 2 weeks, I was truly terrified. I cried every day for 2 weeks, that's right. So stressed. 2 weeks and 1 day, you would have thought we were Londoners. You would have thought we were born there. The way that we navigated the tubes, the way we get in and out, the way we roll our eyes at tourists, the way that we could just instantly know this new reality took me getting over that hump of the discomfort. And it was such a life-changing experience. I came home, I got married, and my second child is named London. So the cost of your new reality will be your old one. But then we also worry about the perception. If I'm going to change something, if I'm going to parent different, or I'm going to act different, or I'm going to have a different marriage, what will they think? What must they think? And I'll tell you, perception's a funny thing because we truly believe that we can capture and control how people see us. We think it's possible to make you feel a certain way about me and make you feel that way about me your whole life. I will tell you, I used to hate, and I'm using this with all my chest, I used to hate Angelina Jolie. I was Team Aniston. I didn't think she was all that classy, and so for the early 2000s, most of my personality was hating Angelina Jolie. She was giving a lot of money to charity, she was adopting a lot of kids, she was trying to be a director, just a lot to hate about her. And I would forward these articles on to my sister about it, and I would bring her up like at lunches, and they'd be like, yeah, she is the worst. I'm like, no, she's the worst. Like, it was a whole thing for me. But what I noticed about that is that the more that I hated Angelina, I kind of watched that she just kind of lived her life, right? She was able to carry herself with true grace through my hatred. And because she was able to overcome my hatred of her, which was intense, I started to develop a real respect for her. And then I kind of started to like her. And now I stand before you, the biggest Angelina Jolie fan you'll ever see. There's really not much to hate about her. She gives money to charity. She adopts from around the world. She's a great director. So if you haven't checked out Angelina Jolie, let me be that person for you, because perceptions of you can, will, and should change. When we accept that there may be people who don't like our changes. There may not be people who want us to untangle those knots. There is a lot of people that may want you to keep those knots exactly where they are. And that's okay, because once we accept that those perceptions will change, then you can really live your life. And finally, there's this responsibility, which is understanding you are fully in control of your life. Fully in control. One of my really good friends is an executive director of a nonprofit, and she was on the phone with me. She's this nonprofit in Los Angeles. She was on the phone with me last week in tears. I'm so stressed out. I'm so stressed out. I said, tell me everything. She said, my board chair wants me to put on an event in March. I said, when did he tell you this? And she said, in December. I said, what's the event? She goes, well, it's just this new event and it's in Las Vegas. I said, you don't live in Las Vegas. She's like, I know. I'm so stressed. I don't know how I'm going to get a venue. She's going through all this stuff. And I said, wait a minute. Your board chair told you to put on an event that's never been put on in a city you don't live in and gave you 3 months to do that? She's like, yeah. I said, are you sure that that's what he said to you? She said, well, he said he thought it'd be a good idea. I said, okay. Let's unravel that for a minute. And so as we talked about it, she realized she had done the thing that we all do, which is we serve a sentence handed down by somebody who does not know they're the warden. So many times, oh, they have to do this. They told me I have to do this. Do you know how many trainings I've not done for the University of Oklahoma? They're like, you've got to do this OSHA training. And I'm 17 years in and I've never done it. So if there is a spill in a lab, I am not your girl. But all I'm saying is that sometimes we let ourselves get handcuffed by people because we heard them say something. My department chair is one of my best friends. And so she, for several years, she'd call and we'd talk and we'd chat because we're on different campuses. And she'd come up with all these ideas, and then I would go do those ideas. And I got to such a level of burnout 5 years in, I called her in tears. I said, I can't do all these projects anymore. And she goes, what projects are you talking about? I was like, all those projects that we brainstormed. She's like, oh, I was just connecting with you. I was just dreaming big with you. Which I guess in hindsight is nice because I got a lot done. But I was serving this sentence with her not even knowing she had handcuffed me, right? When it comes to the tatter, our knots don't bind us as much as our fear of those loose ends does, right? And on the other side of that, right, is a little girl named London who is carrying the torch for a great experience that I finally just went over that hump to do. And then finally we get to the thread. We get to that point where we're past acceptance and now we are at the construction, where we now get to design the way we want it all to go. And in order to design the way you want it to go, whether it's your marriage or your friendship or your work or your whole damn life, in order to design it, you've got to worry about your vitality, your vision, and your vibe. When we think about our vitality, this is very, you'll know this, especially if you're in education, it's very Maslow's hierarchy here, but vitality, you're not going to be able to do anything if you're not safe, physically and psychologically, at work, at home, whatever it is. Do you have a level of safety? Are you mentally and physically healthy? Do you have rest? Do you have support? Do you have autonomy in your job or in your marriage to make decisions? And do you have self-worth, which I define as a very healthy relationship with yourself? Because if you don't have these, then you doing a 5-year plan or figuring out your personal brand is nothing. These are the basics, and I will tell you, women in particular ignore these so much. So until these are running on 5, you're not ready. You've got to get your vitality where it needs to be. And second, you have to have a vision. And I would say most people don't really have a great vision for their life because the way they've orchestrated it is incorrect. So make doubly sure that all aspects of your life point in the right direction. And so most people align their life like this. There is a massive amount of work at the top. There's some random shit on the side. And then there's the house, the family, and the friends. And look at me in the middle. Oh, I'm just spinning around with unconscious anger. And I'm giving all I can to all these things. I am in service to work. I am in service to my family. I am in service to that stuff that's always on the second step at our house that no one will take up but me. What you really have to do is change the way this model looks. It's got to look like this. It's got to be self. And then all those things feed into that. And you go, Meg, that's so selfish. That's right. I've never met a selfish woman. Not yet. I've not met her. If she exists, you let me know. But most of them are spinning around in a circle like this. All right? We don't like her, okay? It's Tina in accounting. She's kind of mean, but she's trying to do it all, right? But if we align like this, now we start asking, how can all of these things be in service to you? You are self. You are the whole thing. Everything else is just the thing that lets you be you. All those things are in cahoots for your success. So if we zoom in on self, what is it you want? Right? And it doesn't even have to be 5 years. If you could just say 1 month from now, what are you doing less of? What are you doing more of? What do you never feel? What is the biggest compliment you receive? Let's start small. And hey, if you can do that, let's move to a year. Let's move to 5 years. But if you don't have everything pointing and an army that is helping you lift this off the ground with your vitality high, then those 5-year plans don't mean anything. Finally, you have to think about your vibe. Imagine that you see a friend across the park, and your friend is with someone you've never met before. And your friend is described, because you're going to walk and see each other, you're going to meet this new person, and your friend leans over and is describing you. What 3 words would you love for your friend to use on this new person? Do you want them to think you're kind, supportive, encouraging? Do you give intentional thought to how you want people to think about you? I don't know what mine would be. I couldn't come up with it if I tried. But I hope it's certain things, right? And when I meet that person and we have a nice conversation and then I walk away, what do you hope those 2 people say behind your back? Again, I don't know, but I need to give it some thought. I think about, I'm a millennial, so I think about Nick Hexum from the band 311. And I love this line from the song Amber, which is, amber is the color of your energy. Has a more beautiful moment been captured about a woman? I'm not seeing your body, I'm seeing your energy, and it's amber. What color is my energy, right? What color is your vibe, man? What are you giving out? Because what you put out there is what you get back, so I need you thinking about your vibe. A lot of us don't think about our vibe very much. When it comes to the thread, I don't want you to spend so much time on your threads that you forget about the full tapestry. I want to turn now to the Inconvenient Unraveling of Gemma Sinclair. Before I close, I want to read a passage where Gemma is clearly in the tease with her therapist, Dr. Fox. She's just uncovered some stuff about her family, some dynamics that she's not thrilled with. Dr. Fox's expression remained neutral. Why do you think this happened? Because I'm pathetic, Gemma. I am falling apart under the weight of everything, from the pressure of being a mother. How is it this hard? Why is it this hard? I sometimes think about all the things it takes to be a mother, the daily task, and frankly, it all sounds so easy, trite even. Bathe the kids, feed the kids, play with the kids, and yet I can't find the energy for any of it. As if any one of those things is such an overwhelmingly difficult task that the very thought of it makes me tired. I'm so overwhelmed that I'm bored, and I'm bored by how constantly overwhelmed I am. Why does every movement I make as a daughter, wife, and mother feel so scrutinized, and yet I feel absolutely invisible? I have disappeared from my own life. Just try making friends at this age, or find a pair of jeans that fit a body that is no longer familiar to you while also being surrounded by strangers who smile at your baby as you walk by but won't even meet your eyes. I am nothing anymore. I am nowhere to be found. And add unrelenting shame to that because of how self-centered that sounds. Who am I to complain about this life I decided I wanted? I wanted to be married and have a career and kids, and now that I have all of that, I can't seem to manage all of that or enjoy any of it. God, I am choking with privilege, and yet I still have the breath to complain. I have no idea how to be there for my husband and kids while feeling the pull of my own family. How can I be a mom when I still feel so much like a daughter? I've got to keep everyone's feelings in mind with every decision I make, and even trying to explain what it feels like to be doing constant emotional labor is like, I don't know. Like waking up and trying to explain a fading dream that was so vivid the night before. So yeah, how could I possibly manage everything and everyone? Who do I prioritize and why? Why am I the only one who has to make all the decisions? Because whether or not my kid is breastfed, or how long he uses a pacifier, or if he's sleeping well, or where he goes to school, or if I stay home or work, or what we have for dinner every night seems to be on my shoulders. I mean, I can't imagine what would happen if I just didn't plan the birthday parties for my kids, or didn't figure out Mother's Day plans for my mom while pretending to enjoy the day myself, or wasn't always the one the daycare teacher calls when Bo is sick. Why and when did I sign up to be fully responsible for absolutely every decision, but have the power over nothing? Gemma felt a mixture of relief and regret in her chest from expelling the air and the sorrow that came from all she said. She watched as Dr. Fox sat for a beat, then uncrossed her legs, stood up, walked over to the couch, and sat beside her. Dr. Fox turned her body to face Gemma, feeling strange at the closeness. Gemma turned her head toward her. "What are you doing?" "I want to make sure you feel seen," Dr. Fox said. Gemma scooted back a few inches on the couch. "This is not what I meant." "Should I sit on the other side of you?" "No." "Would more eye contact help?" "What is happening?" "I want you to feel my presence." "Okay, well, it is felt. You may go back to your seat." Dr. Fox nodded, walked back to her chair, and sat down. "I'm very confused about what just happened," Gemma said. "Well, after hearing all you had to say, I made a decision to come sit next to you, and you didn't like it." "That part I got. What I don't get is why." Dr. Fox shrugged. "Why does why matter?" "Because I'm confused." "But what is done is done. Why does your confusion about it matter?" "I made a decision, the decision is done, the impact of my decision happened, and you didn't like it, but you still want to know what my intention was, right?" Gemma's forehead wrinkled into a maze of confusion. "You've made decisions the night your son was hurt. The impact of those decisions have happened. So what do your intentions matter?" "Because I never intended for my child to get hurt," Gemma yelled out before covering her mouth with her hand. Dr. Fox nodded. "So your intentions in those decisions do matter." "Well, of course they matter. Even though what I did is done, I need it to be understood that I never intended for my child to get hurt." "Okay, so when you say you feel you have to make all the decisions, and yet you feel you have no power, what does that mean? Where are you powerless? In the intentions of your decisions or in their impact?" Gemma sat for a minute before squeezing her eyes closed. "I suppose in the way my decisions will be perceived." Dr. Fox nodded. "Ah, you want to have power over how everyone will interpret your decisions." A faint laugh escaped Gemma's nose. "Could I?" A smile appeared on Dr. Fox's lip. "I wonder what judgments you're making about your parents' decision the day you got hurt." Gemma sighed deeply. "I just cannot understand what they did. I just will never get it." "Ah, and can you imagine someone feeling that way about your decisions the day Calvin was injured and all your decisions since then?" Gemma nodded sadly. "And if someone were judging you for those decisions, what would you say to them in defense of yourself?" Gemma shrugged. "Decisions made in chaos are tough to explain, I guess." Gemma hugged her body, too overwhelmed. "I may not understand why my parents did what they did that day, but I have to assume it was like any decisions made in chaos." "Ah, so you can empathize with your parents." "I think they made the wrong decisions." Dr. Fox stretched out her arms and rested her palms on the top of her head. "And did you?" "I mean, this may not make any sense, but what I did didn't feel like decisions." "Ah, what did it feel like?" "Panic," Gemma said, a sigh so large accompanying the word that she felt like a deflating balloon. She closed her eyes and thought back over that night and all the decisions she made, so many bad decisions that never felt like decisions at all. She gasped lightly. Dr. Fox's eyebrows rose as if in anticipation. "When I said earlier that I have to make all the decisions, but I have no power, I think what I meant was it never feels like I'm making decisions. It feels like I'm making automatic movements within chaos." "Ah, and you feel invisible when there's chaos." "Yes," Gemma nodded. "That's right. I feel powerless, invisible, and on autopilot." Dr. Fox tilted her head to the left and then to the right. "Where's the chaos coming from, Gemma?" "What do you mean, from these chaotic events?" "But you said earlier you always feel powerless." "Right," Gemma said firmly. "Right," she said again softer. "So you're giving a lot of power to the decisions made on just 2 days of your 35-year lifespan." "No, it's just..." "Or maybe you feel like you're on autopilot all the time because you feel you're in chaos all the time." Dr. Fox glanced at her watch. "We're nearly at time, but I want to know one thing. How do you plan to tell Calvin what happened to him?" Gemma frowned. "I don't know. I haven't given that any thought. He's just a baby. I don't even know how or why that would ever come up." "Right," Dr. Fox said. "So if you want power over your decisions, maybe that's the one you start with." Gemma met Dr. Fox's eyes and held her gaze. Dr. Fox shook her head, looking up at the ceiling as her hair fell away from her face. When she tilted her head back down to face Gemma, she had a strange look in her eyes. Gemma watched her intensely. Dr. Fox cleared her throat. Mom, I have a question. Gemma's chin jutted forward in curiosity. My college girlfriend wanted to know where I got this scar. Dr. Fox pointed to her eye. Gemma's face relaxed in understanding. She took a deep inhale and worked to keep her eyes from rolling. You've never told me about this scar, and I've always been curious, Dr. Fox continued. First, tell me about this girlfriend, Gemma quipped. Any tattoos? Mom, I'm serious, Dr. Fox said, a stern expression on her face. Gemma bit her lip. She tried to think of Calvin, her 9-week-old son, home from college. She suddenly felt so overcome with sadness. Where does he go to college? What is his major? Are he and Beau close? Did he do well in high school? What attributes of his did his teachers comment on at parent-teacher conferences? Who was his best friend in elementary school, and do they still keep in touch? Was he into sports, theater? Is he silly, serious, sarcastic? Does he have freckles or curly hair or knobby knees? Did he have to have braces or wear glasses? What does his handwriting look like? What were his first words? A sob caught in Gemma's throat. Did I ever feel bonded to him, or was I so blinded by what happened, my decisions and my stress, that I missed truly seeing him? Gemma wiped her nose with her sleeve. I am so angry at my parents for the decisions they made on my behalf as a child, and here I am on the verge of doing the same damn thing. Dr. Fox relaxed into her chair. Yeah, that's parenthood. A beat hung between them before Dr. Fox looked again at her watch and rose from the chair. Gemma, there are decisions that are thrust upon us, and there are decisions in which we are lucky enough to make. I'd suggest giving thought to which ones are more responsible for all the things you feel right now. Gemma walked out of the office and into the lobby, a warm sensation spreading across her chest. She wasn't quite sure, but it felt a little bit like relief, the slight easing of her unrelenting sorrow. That last sentence had escaped Dr. Fox's lips so easily and with such obviousness that it almost seemed silly, unnecessary even, to say. Yet Gemma would look back on that sentence years later and only then fully understand that was the beginning of her healing. And with that, I would say, pay attention to your own knots and keep pulling at threads. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Meg, for all that you've done and shared with us this evening. We'd like to open it up for questions. Who has a question, either about the information that Meg shared and all of the threads and the points that she made, or about Gemma? Any thoughts or questions that you all have? I'll bring the microphone around.
And I'll say I'm a professor, so it's completely normal for me to stand in front of blank-faced people while someone decides who's going to talk first, so it's fine.
I have a question to get us started, and then I'll come to Caitlin. My question for you is, you wrote this book. The central character is a woman. She's going through her postpartum time. There are a lot of different aspects, I think, of readers reading this book. Talk to us a little bit about how women from different generations, how men have responded to this book. How has the reader themselves kind of interpreted this book?
I love that. Thank you for that question. So I'd say a couple of things. I drove my parents up here. It was no big deal, they were on the way. But I drove my parents up here, and I was talking to them because I've done a lot of book clubs. I've gone to a lot of local book clubs. I've traveled for a little bit of book clubs. I've done a lot of readings. And I've had this like stark divide that's forming by age more than by gender. And I don't know if I think my parents agreed with this, but I said I feel like the 65 and older crowd has been a little bit more irritated at the main character than my millennial, maybe even Gen Xers, because I think there is this sense of this is a woman doing therapy and talking about family dynamics and digging into secrets and talking about her feelings. And I think I've just noticed a generational divide. I had one woman say to me, I looked at this and I thought Gemma just needed to buck up, which is, it would be a short book. Gemma had an issue and then she bucked up, and that would be it was more like a novella. So So I've noticed that. What I have liked the most about it, though, is that so much of this book looks at the physical aspect of giving birth. So there's a lot of blood and poop in the book, and I'm very proud of the blood and poop that's in the book. But I think it's been both very helpful to women to see it talked about, and I think it's been extremely eye-opening for men. And I think that's been really good, that they get to see like an insight into not just the physical, or not just the mental sort of postpartum part, but also the actual physical care of our bodies after birth. So that's kind of been what I've noticed. Thank you so much.
Any plans or thoughts to tell us about the thread and what happens next with Gemma or the characters?
After the book or currently in the book?
After the book.
Well, then I'd give away the ending a little bit, but so I have had just thousands of people tell me to write a sequel. No, I've had like 2 people say you should write a sequel. So the masses are speaking, and I'd like to think that, you know, in anything that we do, right? When we do a workout routine, or we start a new thing in January, or we're not going to scroll on our phone, and we achieve that goal, it is the maintaining of that goal that is the hardest part. And so I think it would be in that sort of the phase of life I'm in. I'm 42, and I feel like it's a lot about like the maintenance of your life, right? Your kids are sort of at this level, and so I think the threads would be, what does it look like to untangle your whole life, reweave it, and then work that, right? Because we don't get, our dreams don't come true. We work a dream. We have to continue to maintain it. So I think that's where I see Gemma going next. I love that.
Other questions? You shared, Meg, that your favorite character is Dr. Fox. Can you share why?
Yeah, so so this book was written during the pandemic, and my husband is an editor, not a book editor, but a really, really good editor by trade and by education. So he's always my first eyes. And originally, Dr. Fox, who's the therapist and a very, very important character in Gemma's journey, and may we all find our Dr. Fox, whoever that may be. Originally, she was this like old, curmudgeon-y white guy. I mean, just a guy. And my husband was like, I don't feel like this character is working, and I can't really point out why, but I think that character needs to be a woman. So it took a man to mansplain to me why anyways, it's fine. But when he said that, it was like this light bulb went off, because I was like, oh gosh, I had to reflect on my own career at Drury, at OU, that I've mostly been mentored by men. And so when I went to write a mentor character, it was this man, and what was happening is this man was educating her, and she really needed to be witnessed, not educated. And so when I turned the character into a woman, suddenly the collaboration and the humor, there's a lot of humor with Dr. Fox. She's very quirky. I had fun with her. I just felt like I really had to earn her, but the reason that she's my favorite is because I had to fight through my own tangle there of like, oh man, I am so like I'm like, this is a feminist book, and even I was like, a man should help her, and my husband was like, a man shouldn't help her, and I was like, interesting. So I had this like whole journey, misogynistic journey to get to Dr. Fox. So I really earned her. I love that question.
Other questions?
This is so weird to have a former professor ask you a question. Yes, Dr. Waters?
Meg, this is just fantastic, and I'm still processing the framework that you offered in that process. But because I follow you on social media and have seen your daughters, I'm also, I think you're an amazing role model, but I'm trying to imagine as you were writing this book and thinking about this character who's a mom and what she's processing, do your daughters initiate conversations with you about the character or these concepts that, because your mind is always working,
yeah,
and you've talked with your husband about things, so how present have your daughters been in these insights that you've developed?
I love this question because as an English major and just growing up being a big reader, I feel like the quintessential idealistic version of a writer is a man in a cabin without internet and a typewriter and a beard. And I think we think of like writers as like working in isolation, but I can't I don't have that luxury. I have kids and another job, and so they were constantly running in and out. Like I kind of have to write a sentence at a time. But my daughters are profoundly more emotionally intelligent and aware than I am. And one time, my oldest daughter came home, and I was working on, I can't remember if it was this book or something else, I was working on something. And she said, well, I told my friend Addison something, and she just was like this. And then, she was telling me this whole story, and I said, don't tell Addison stuff anymore, And she was like, Mom, it's not my fault she responded that way. I'm allowed to say my feelings. I said, you're right, I'm so sorry. How can I be a better mother? And she's training me. So there's a lot of those like insights where you've got these daughters that feel that psychological safety to sort of provide those insights. But I will also say, because I struggled so much in the first part of having my oldest daughter, and I am not Gemma, but the truths of what I have felt are in this book, I couldn't have written it much earlier than I did, because I think it took a full 10 plus years to get over that myself, right? So you want the fodder, but you can't be so close to it that all of a sudden the husband is your husband and the child is your child, right? And so I think this came when it came, because that's when it could come, I guess. Thank you.
Other questions?
Writing fiction can be so liberating after you've written so much nonfiction. Yeah. When you go back to writing more nonfiction, what will have you learned from the process?
I love this question. So I am the worst at like the business model of it, because you're supposed to get in your genre and stay in your genre and build your audience. And so my first book was in the humorous essays category. The second book was in career and professional development, and now this is a novel. So I guess I figure out the point I need to make, and then figure out the genre for that. And what has been so lovely is that people do follow me, and you should follow me on Instagram at Meg Myers Morgan, have just come along for the ride, right? So it's been liberating, not just to turn to fiction, but to say, oh my gosh, the audience, they'll follow, right? They'll come along. But I really thought this is all I have to do, and I just want to tell this story. But there's a second novel on the way, and I don't know when I'll go back to nonfiction, but I'll never say never. But it's been very fun to just go, I'll do whatever comes next. And I want to give that to everybody, right? Because I think a lot of us, you become an engineer, and then you're an engineer. Okay, well, you're an engineer this year. Maybe next year you want to be something else, and just sort of in the ways that we cannot be shackled to something. But yeah, I also think that writing fiction was harder in some ways, because you're still having to find your audience and find your tone of voice. And so there's just so many differences between the two. It'd be like asking me what my favorite child is to know if it's nonfiction or fiction. But I will keep Drury apprised. I keep coming back and talking about books. So, but yes, I think a novel is next.
Last chance for questions.
And then do not talk to me after this. Don't come ask me. I'm just kidding.
Last chance for questions.
For public questions. Gotcha.
I can give you the microphone while you're signing books too, if you want.
Sorry, I was caught off guard, I think, and was wondering what men have had as a reaction to you and these stories you're telling, because I find that as I'm Generation X, and so we have been really researching, I think, trying to figure out what we don't know.
Yeah.
And then find out later on, I think a lot of us are very open to hearing that maybe your wife is angry or that you're holding back, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of men, like your husband was like, no, I want to be here.
Yeah.
But how do you find men reacting to it? Because I imagine some of them are defensive, thinking, oh, hold on, that wasn't my fault. And I'm sure some of them have been maybe open to it. I was just curious what the reaction's been from men.
I love this question. It might surprise you. I haven't just had hordes and hordes of men, approach me about the book. But I did have men on the book launch team, and I have very high quality men in my life. I want to give you a little tip. I actually heard this on TikTok. The more that you hate men, the better the men are in your life. Like, you have higher quality men in your life. So I'm surrounded by deeply high quality men that have been very, very supportive. Even my husband at one point was like, it's just a lot of blood. Like, should it be this much blood? And I don't want to be the one to tell you to pull back this much blood. So I think that's kind of been the experience I've had. But I do think, again, it's been more generational. I have not had aside from my own father, who's very supportive, I've not had any, like, in the older generation, any men that have read it. So if you are a man and you read it, I want to know your opinion of the book. But I hope that I have had a few that say, you know, I have these knots too. I've had these issues too. It's a more universal theme, I think, than just about moms and women. Thank you. And thank you to this bookstore for being here. I'm so excited that we have an independent bookstore here.
Yes, thank you. So let's transition as we wrap up our time with Meg on stage. We do have the Story House bookstore here. They have the books for sale, and then Meg will be at the table here to sign. So if you are interested, feel free to come up and you can grab a book. And if you brought books for Meg to sign, you can go ahead and have her do that. One last, I'm going to give a little plug. I am so grateful for the opportunity to be an art reader for Gemma's story. I know there's at least one or two others in the room. If you have not and do not follow Meg, please do at
Meg Myers Morgan.
And her group, the Unravelers, is really an amazing, supportive, engaging group to continue these conversations and keep pulling at those threads. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.